Something is quietly happening across America. It isn't the kind of news that dominates television headlines for weeks. It isn't the topic people discuss every day at family dinners or neighborhood gatherings. Yet for millions of seniors, this change has the potential to affect their future in ways they never imagined. And the most surprising part? Many of them still don't know about it. Robert was 72 years old when he first began to sense that something was changing. Like many retirees, his life had become simple. Every morning he woke up before sunrise. He brewed a fresh cup of coffee. Then he sat near the same window he had sat beside for years. The house was quiet. Far too quiet. There was a time when that house was full of life. His wife filled every room with laughter. His children ran through the hallways. Family dinners stretched late into the evening. Back then, the future felt endless. But time has a way of changing everything. Now, the laughter was gone. The children had their own lives, and the silence seemed to grow louder every year. As Robert sipped his coffee one morning, he picked up an envelope that had arrived the previous afternoon. At first glance, it looked ordinary, just another letter, just another piece of paperwork. Nothing unusual. But as he slowly read through it, a strange feeling settled in his chest. There were terms he didn't recognize, references to updates, changes, new procedures, information that appeared important. The more he read, the more questions filled his mind. Had something changed? Was there something he should know? Had he missed an important update that could affect his future? For the first time in a long while, Robert felt uneasy. Across the country, another retiree was experiencing the same feeling. Her name was Elena. She had spent more than 40 years working. Nothing in her life had come easy. She worked as a cashier. She worked long shifts. She sacrificed weekends. She missed holidays. She did whatever was necessary to support her family. Every paycheck represented years of effort. Every dollar represented sacrifice. Like millions of Americans, she believed that one day, after decades of work, she would finally enjoy a peaceful retirement. And eventually that day arrived. But retirement wasn't exactly what she expected. Prices continued rising. Groceries cost more. Utilities cost more. Medical expenses seemed to increase every year. Every dollar mattered. Every decision mattered. One afternoon, her phone rang. It was her closest friend. "Have you heard about the latest update?" her friend asked. Elena paused. "What update?" Her friend hesitated. "I'm not completely sure yet, but people are talking about changes. Everyone seems concerned." A wave of anxiety moved through Elena. She had heard rumors before. Sometimes they were true, sometimes they weren't. But at her age, uncertainty felt dangerous. She couldn't afford mistakes. She couldn't afford surprises. And she certainly couldn't afford to ignore something important. What Elena didn't realize was that millions of seniors across the country were asking the exact same questions. What is changing? How does it affect me? What happens if I miss something important? These questions were spreading quietly from one community to another, from retirement groups, from family conversations, from neighbors sharing information, from seniors trying to make sense of what they were hearing. The truth was simple. Most retirees spend decades preparing financially for retirement. They save money. They budget carefully. They make sacrifices. But very few prepare for how quickly rules, systems, and procedures can change. Many assume that once retirement begins, everything stays the same. The checks arrive. The benefits continue. Life moves forward. But reality is often more complicated. Systems evolve. Policies change. Requirements get updated. Technology advances. And sometimes the people most affected are the very people who hear about those changes last. Several days later, Robert met with a group of friends at a local park. It was a routine they had followed for years. They walked together, shared stories, talked about family, discussed current events. But on this particular morning, the conversation felt different. Everyone seemed worried about something. One friend had heard about a new process. Another had heard about updated requirements. Someone else mentioned a letter they recently received. Yet nobody seemed to know the complete story. That uncertainty created something powerful: fear. Because when people don't have clear information, they begin filling the gaps with assumptions. And assumptions often become rumors. Rumors become anxiety, and anxiety spreads faster than facts. As the discussion continued, one of Robert's friends said something that caused the entire group to fall silent. "I'm not afraid of getting older," he said quietly. "I'm afraid of finding out too late that I missed something important." No one responded, because everyone understood exactly what he meant. Most seniors are not afraid of hard work. They are not afraid of sacrifice. They are not afraid of responsibility. They have spent their entire lives overcoming challenges. But they do fear uncertainty. They fear unexpected changes. They fear waking up one morning and discovering that a decision they should have made weeks ago can no longer be made. That fear lingered in Robert's mind long after the conversation ended. As weeks passed, more people began searching for answers. Retirees started asking questions. Families began investigating. Community groups started sharing information. And slowly, a troubling pattern emerged. Many seniors rarely checked official updates. Many relied entirely on word of mouth. Others assumed someone would notify them if something important happened. Unfortunately, that assumption wasn't always safe. The world was changing faster than ever before. Information moved quickly. Important announcements appeared and disappeared in a matter of days, and many retirees felt overwhelmed trying to keep up. One evening, Elena sat alone in her living room. The sun had already set. The house was quiet. In her lap rested an old photo album. She slowly turned each page. Pictures from decades earlier stared back at her. There was her wedding day. There were photographs of her children as toddlers. There were birthdays, family vacations, Christmas mornings, moments that once felt ordinary but had become priceless memories. A small smile appeared on her face. Then came sadness, because those years seemed to have disappeared in the blink of an eye. Time had moved faster than she ever imagined, and now she found herself facing a reality she had never expected. The future felt uncertain. Not because she lacked courage, not because she lacked experience, but because the world around her kept changing. As she looked through those photographs, a thought suddenly entered her mind. What if there was information that could help protect her future? What if there were changes she needed to understand? What if millions of seniors were unknowingly overlooking something important? The questions refused to leave her mind. That night, she barely slept, and she wasn't alone. Across America, countless retirees were experiencing the same concerns. They weren't looking for special treatment. They weren't asking for miracles. They simply wanted clarity. They wanted security. They wanted confidence that the benefits they depended on would remain protected. What none of them realized was that a much bigger story was beginning to unfold. A story hidden beneath headlines. A story involving changes, confusion, and unanswered questions. A story that would force millions of seniors to pay closer attention than ever before. And in the next part, Robert and Elena will uncover a discovery that changes everything they thought they knew. Because the update everyone was talking about was only the beginning. The real surprise was still ahead. The next morning arrived with an unusual silence in Robert's home. Not the peaceful kind of silence he had grown used to over the years, but a heavier silence. The kind that sits in your mind even when nothing is actually wrong. He kept thinking about the letter. He kept thinking about the words he couldn't fully understand. And most of all, he kept thinking about one question. What exactly is changing? And why does nobody seem to have a clear answer? Robert wasn't the only one feeling this way. Across the city, Elena was having the same restless morning. She had barely slept. The thoughts kept returning again and again like a loop she couldn't escape. She opened her kitchen cabinet, poured herself a cup of tea, and sat down slowly. But even the warmth of the cup in her hands didn't calm her mind, because something strange was happening. It wasn't just one message. It wasn't just one rumor. It was everywhere. At the grocery store, she overheard two seniors talking about new updates. At the pharmacy, someone mentioned changes in processing. At the community center, a notice board had a printed sheet titled, "Important Information for Retirees." No one explained it clearly. No one seemed fully sure. But everyone was talking, and that was the problem. When information is incomplete, fear fills the gaps. Later that day, Robert decided to visit a local social services office. He didn't like going there. Waiting rooms always felt long, and conversations always felt complicated. But today was different. Today, he needed answers. Inside the office, the atmosphere was exactly as he expected. People sitting quietly, some holding documents, some staring at the floor, some whispering to each other with worried expressions. Robert sat down and waited. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, his name was called. He walked to the counter. A staff member greeted him politely but professionally. Robert placed the letter on the desk. "I received this," he said slowly. "Can you explain it to me?" The staff member looked at the document. For a moment, her expression didn't change. But then something subtle shifted in her eyes. Not alarm, not surprise, but recognition. She nodded slightly. "Yes," she said carefully. "There have been updates, but most people misunderstand them." That sentence caught Robert's attention immediately. "Misunderstand?" he repeated. She continued. "The system itself hasn't been changed in the way people think, but certain procedures, verification steps, and reporting requirements have been adjusted." Robert felt a small relief, but also confusion. "So, does it affect my benefits?" he asked. The staff member paused before answering, and that pause meant more than words. "It depends," she said finally. "For most people, nothing changes immediately. But for some cases, missing updates or incorrect information can delay processing." Robert's heart tightened slightly. Delay. That was the word that stayed in his mind. Because for retirees, even a small delay can feel like a major disruption. Bills don't wait. Medicine doesn't wait. Life doesn't wait. As Robert left the office, he realized something important. The problem wasn't just the update itself, the problem was confusion. Later that evening, Elena received another phone call. This time it was from her cousin. "You need to be careful," her cousin said urgently. "People are saying benefits might be affected if paperwork isn't updated correctly." Elena closed her eyes. Another warning, another half story, another piece of information without full context. "Where did you hear this?" she asked. "I saw it online," her cousin replied. That was enough to worry her even more. Online information spreads fast, but accuracy spreads slowly. After the call ended, Elena sat in silence again. But this time, something inside her changed. Fear was no longer just an emotion. It was turning into action. She opened her drawer and pulled out every official letter she had received over the past year. She spread them across the table, page after page, notice after notice. Some she had read carefully, some she had only skimmed, some she had ignored, thinking they were unimportant. Now she wasn't so sure. Meanwhile, Robert met his friend group again the next morning. But the mood had changed completely. One man said his neighbor had received a new verification request. Another said his relative had been asked to confirm updated details. Someone else said they heard about processing delays in certain cases. None of it was confirmed, but all of it felt real enough to worry about. That's how uncertainty spreads, not through facts, but through fragments. Robert finally spoke. "Maybe the issue isn't that something big changed," he said slowly. "It's that nobody understands what actually changed." The group fell silent again, because he was right, and that realization made everything more unsettling. At that moment, Elena arrived at the community center, hoping to attend a senior information session she had signed up for earlier. The room was half full. A speaker stood at the front. Papers were distributed. Everyone listened carefully, but the explanation was technical, too technical. Words like verification protocols, updated eligibility review, and processing adjustments filled the room. For some people, it made sense. For many others, it didn't. Elena felt something building inside her. Not panic, not anger, but concern. Because she realized something important. If she didn't fully understand this information, how many others also didn't understand it? And what would happen if they misunderstood something critical? After the session ended, she walked outside slowly. The evening air was cool. The sky was fading into orange. People around her were still discussing what they heard. Some looked relieved. Others looked more confused than before. Elena stopped walking for a moment. She looked up at the sky and asked herself a question she had never considered before. Why does something so important feel so unclear? Back at home, Robert sat alone in his living room. The letter still lay on the table, but now it didn't feel like just a piece of paper. It felt like a signal, a warning, a reminder that even in retirement, nothing is ever completely static. He picked it up again, read it slowly, and for the first time, he noticed something he had missed before, a small line at the bottom. For updated information, recipients are advised to review official notifications regularly. He leaned back in his chair and whispered to himself, "So this is what everyone missed. Not a single dramatic change, not one massive announcement, but a quiet expectation to stay updated, to stay aware, to not ignore small details." And that realization changed how he saw everything, because now he understood the truth behind the confusion. The system wasn't necessarily hiding something, but people were no longer paying attention the way they used to. And that gap was where misunderstanding grew. As night fell, both Robert and Elena reached the same silent conclusion. Whatever was happening was not over yet. In fact, it felt like it was only beginning. And in the final part of this story, the real meaning behind the update will finally come into focus. But by then, it may already be too late for those who ignored it. The silence that followed the previous weeks felt different for Robert and Elena. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was waiting, like something unfinished was still hanging in the air, refusing to disappear. Robert found himself checking his mailbox more often than usual. Not because he expected something new every day, but because he feared missing something important if he didn't. Elena felt the same way. Every morning, she opened her emails slowly. Every notification made her heart pause for a second, not out of excitement, but uncertainty. And that uncertainty had now spread far beyond just the two of them. Across neighborhoods, retirement communities, and senior centers, people were talking more than ever, but understanding less than ever. Because every conversation seemed to lead to the same problem. No one had the full picture. One afternoon, Robert finally received another official envelope. This one felt heavier, not physically, but emotionally. He sat at his table for a long time before opening it. When he finally did, he read every line carefully, and this time something became clear. It wasn't a new benefit cut. It wasn't a sudden system change. It wasn't a hidden rule. It was something far more subtle. A reminder, a requirement for updated verification awareness, a push towards staying informed through official channels. That was it. No dramatic secret, no hidden crisis, just a structured reminder that systems evolve slowly, and people must keep up with the updates meant for them. Robert leaned back slowly. A strange feeling filled his chest. Relief, mixed with embarrassment. Because suddenly he realized something important. Most of the fear he felt wasn't caused by the system itself. It was caused by not understanding it clearly in time. At the same moment, Elena was sitting with her daughter. For the first time in weeks, she decided to talk openly about everything she had been feeling. "I thought something big was happening," she admitted softly. "I thought maybe we were missing something that could affect everything." Her daughter listened quietly, then replied gently, "Mom, sometimes nothing huge changes, but small updates feel big when no one explains them properly." That sentence stayed with Elena because it was true. In today's world, information didn't fail because it didn't exist. It failed because it didn't reach people in a simple, clear way. Later that week, Robert and his friends met again at the park. But this time, the atmosphere was different. Less fear, more understanding. One friend laughed quietly. "So all that worry was mostly confusion?" Another shook his head. "Not confusion, just incomplete information." And that was the real lesson. Not everything alarming is dangerous. Sometimes it is just unclear. Elena, on her side, attended one final community session. This time, she noticed something different. Instead of panic in the room, there was curiosity. Instead of rumors, there were questions. And instead of fear, there was learning. The speaker explained one simple truth. Most important updates are not hidden. They are simply overlooked when life gets busy. Elena finally understood. It wasn't about missing some secret change. It was about staying connected to official information in a world full of noise. As the session ended, she walked outside slowly. The same evening sky was there, the same streets, the same world. But something inside her had changed. Not the system, not her benefits, but her awareness. Back at home, Robert placed the letter neatly inside a folder. For the first time, it didn't feel threatening. It felt like a reminder to stay attentive, not afraid. He looked around his quiet home, and instead of anxiety, he felt something else: clarity. Across the city, Elena did the same. She organized her documents, saved important contacts, and made a simple decision. From now on, she would verify information before believing it. Not because she was scared, but because she understood the value of clarity. Days later, both of them unknowingly reached the same conclusion. The world doesn't become safer just because nothing changes. It becomes safer when people understand what is actually changing. And that was the real update they had been missing all along. Not a hidden policy, not a secret rule, but the importance of staying informed in a fast-moving world. As the story closed, Robert sat once again by his window. Same chair, same morning light, same quiet house. But this time, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt calm. Because now he understood something simple but powerful. Fear grows in the absence of clarity, and clarity begins with attention. Elena, miles away, looked at her calendar and smiled softly. No panic, no confusion, just awareness. And life once again felt manageable. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything was understood.